The effect of social media use on anxiety and depression. I'm Georgia Morgan.
I'm Angela Garris.
And I'm Matt Buttery.
Okay, so as social media usage has increased over the years, psychologists have been researching its effects and what it can do to our social and psychological well-being. One studies reported that social media use can decrease loneliness because it provides more social support from the community. Another study suggests that men have better mental health than women, though these results were specifically for people born and raised in Jerusalem, so it may not be applicable to the rest of the world. Our study aims to answer the question about if the activities engaged when using social media, along with people's genders, can affect their risk for anxiety and depression. So our variables, our independent variables are gender and social media use. We divided social media use into active and passive use. Active being reacting, like liking or loving something on Facebook, commenting and posting on a social media site, and passive would be avoiding interaction with posts and just kind of scrolling through without thinking about it much. Our dependent variables were anxiety and depression. Our hypotheses overall for both anxiety and depression, we predicted there would be a significant main effect on gender, a significant main effect on social media use, and a significant interaction between gender and social media use. More specifically for gender, we predict that testing for levels of anxiety and depression, females will have higher scores for both than their male counterparts. Also, for social media usage, we predict that active social media usage will result in higher levels of anxiety and depression than passive usage for both males and females. So here's our experimental design. For our participants, we use people from the emerging adulthood age range, which was about 18 to 25. Our recruitment methods, we used Amazon's Mechanical Turk, posters around the Williamsburg area, and social media. We had 77 participants, 42 were male and 35 were female. We ended up dropping 13 participants from further analyses because they failed to follow instructions on social media use, which left 64 participants total in our analyses. 37 of which were male and 24 of which were female. For ethnicity, we had 54% white, 26% Black, 11% Hispanic, 5% Asian, 3% Native American, and 1% other. For our measure for both dependent variables, we use the anxiety and depression questionnaire, which consists of 197 items in a dichotomous format. So there will be a question and the participants respond yes or no. The score will be of 1 will be given for yes and a score of 0 will be given for no. And the maximum possible score corresponds to answering yes to all of questions on each subscale, which would be a score of 197. This measure has strong reliability and very high internal consistency with the Cronbach alpha coefficients of 0.92, 0.96, and 0.96 for each of the subscales, respectively. Our procedure, first the participants were brought into a room and asked to fill out a series of questionnaires. First, we had the personal information questionnaire, which they report things like their age, their gender, and their ethnicity. The social media engagement scale, which has them list out which social media sites they use and how they engage with it, whether they post or comment a lot, things like that. And then we have anxiety and depression questionnaire, which takes their baseline scores for anxiety and depression. Participants were then randomly assigned to either passive or active social media groups, and we explained the definition of what that was to them. After a month, the participants were brought back in to get post-manipulation anxiety and depression scores using the anxiety and depression questionnaire again. And we also asked how the participants followed the social media use and if they didn't follow it correctly, such as the 13 participants did, they were excluded from further analyses. The participants were then debriefed and given compensation, and for our analysis, we took the different scores from the pre-test and post-test and used that for our data.
So our results, again, based on these different scores, showed a significant main effect between gender and depression with an F of 4.235 and a p-value of 0.044. Females showed higher levels of depression than males with a mean of 27.18 and males having a mean of 19. We also saw a significant main effect between the type of social media usage and depression with an F of 24.038 and a p-value of 0.00. Active usage resulted in higher levels of depression than passive usage with a mean of 28 compared to the passive usage mean of 16.9. And we also saw a significant interaction between the type of social media use and gender, having an F of 4.317 and a p-value of 0.042. Both genders showed comparable depression scores for passive usage, males having a mean of 16.9167, females having a mean of 16.875. However, for active usage, females scored significantly higher in depression than males, males having a mean of 22.8462 and females having a mean of 31.5263. And so our results for anxiety similarly showed a significant main effect between gender and anxiety levels with an F of 6.154 and a p-value of 0.016. Females showed higher levels of anxiety than males overall, having a mean of 24.7037 compared to the male mean of 18.5676. There was also a significant main effect between social media usage and anxiety with an F of 8.77 and a p-value of 0.004. Active usage showed significantly higher anxiety than passive usage overall, active usage having a mean of 23.7812 and passive usage having a mean of 18.5312. And further, we saw a significant interaction between the type of social media usage and gender with an F of 15.434 and a p-value of 0.00. Females had significantly higher anxiety scores than males for active usage with a mean of 28.0526 compared to the male mean of 17.5385. However, for passive usage, males showed higher anxiety scores than females, with the female mean being 16.75 compared to the male mean of 19.125.
Our aims for this study were to investigate the influence of different types of social media use on depression and anxiety levels among young emerging adults, and to explore whether these results would differ between males and females. For our hypotheses, findings supported that females have higher levels of both anxiety and depression than males. This can be seen in the overall levels of both of these measures when comparing the scores of males to females. For both females and males, active social media use led to higher levels of depression. However, it was only for females that active social media use led to higher levels of anxiety. This contradicts aspects of hypotheses 2, as passive use led to higher levels of anxiety for males. Gender and type of social media use had significant main effects on anxiety and depression, and there was a significant interaction for both. For our first hypotheses, when testing for levels of anxiety and depression, females will have higher scores for both than their male counterparts. Our findings showed that females had higher levels of anxiety than males and even greater levels of depression. This provides support for Altamas, Surveyor, and Epperson, who compared clinical perspectives and discussed the higher prevalence of affective disorders in women. In addition, supporting Ganevsky, Tierds, Karaij, Legersti, and Kummer, who found that females had higher rates of depressive symptoms than males, as they were more inclined to use maladaptive cognitive strategies, such as rumination and catastrophizing. The study found considerable evidence supporting that the higher rates of depressive symptoms in women might be relevant to their less effective ways of coping. Our second hypothesis, active social media usage, will result in higher levels of anxiety and depression than passive usage for both males and females. Our findings showed that active social media use resulted in higher levels of depression for females and males. This provides support for Davila, Hersenberg, Feinstein, Gorman, Bhatia, and Starr, who also found that depressive symptoms were associated with the type of social media usage and its quality. Findings show that for anxiety, active social media use led to higher levels for females, but passive use led to higher levels for males. This differs from Woods and Scott, who found that active use was associated with higher levels of anxiety, despite gender. They found that anxious people tended to engage more in social media. These findings may have differed, as for our sample, males were largely represented in passive use compared to females. This could have potentially skewed our data. Our overall sample size was far less than that used in the Woods and Scott study. We only had a total of 64, whereas they had a total of around 470. These studies also used different age groups. Our study used the emerging adult age group of 18 to 25, whereas the Woods and Scott study used an adolescent age group. Limitations of our study. The study used a small sample group involving more males than females, with a far greater number of males in passive engagement than in active engagement in social media. In addition, there are more than double the amount of females actively using social media than passively using it. To improve internal validity of our study, a larger sample size could be used with more evenly split subgroups. The participants were only from the Williamsburg area. The cultures surrounding mental health and social media use in this area may significantly differ from other areas. To increase the generalizability of the study, included in the sample group should be participants from different geographical locations. In conclusion, active social media use resulted in higher scores in both anxiety and depression for females. For males, active use resulted in higher levels of depression, but passive social media use resulted in higher levels of anxiety. Some further research questions that could be considered. What is the impact of the type of social media use on depression and anxiety amongst different age groups? Does the impact of active versus passive use change in adolescence or later adult life compared to emerging adults? Does the impact of social media use vary over the course of time for depression and anxiety? You could use our basic framework to develop more of a longitudinal study. Can a certain type of social media use be promoted to improve health outcomes? Upon further research into the effects of type of social media use on depression and anxiety, could one be promoted to increase better mental health outcomes? Does type of social media use impact other aspects of mental health? You could potentially look at the impact social media use has on stress levels, empathy levels, or loneliness, for example. Does it impact interpersonal relationships? Thank you for listening to our presentation.